Hello everybody, this is Edward, and so far we learned how to create basic polygonal objects, and of course we can create any types of objects here, but we're gonna look at the most primitive shape Maya has, and that is a polygons. So we can create a bunch of polygons here, a bunch of polygonal objects. We can move them, we can rotate them, and we can also change the position of the pivot point, so we can control from where we are rotating or scaling them. This is what we have learned so far. Now just simply scaling, rotating and moving is not enough. What if we do want to change the shape? And as I said, shape is different from our pivot point. Remember that we talked about this and said that there are actually two nodes. One is the shape, the other one is a pivot. So in order for us to do that, we need to access our shape node and its components. So components, the polygonal components are there are a few of them, or actually there is a bunch of them, but the most commonly used for modeling are vertices, faces and edges. And what I'm doing right now is I'm right-clicking. Right-click. When we right-click, we can actually switch between these different selection modes. So vertex, we now can grab our points on the surface and move them, rotate them and scale them. If I right-click and say face, I'll be able to select a face of the model, which I can also rotate, scale and move. Same goes with an edge. I mean, those are the most common components. And once we are ready to manipulate the whole object as one, we can switch back to the object mode, and that allows us to grab the whole shape, the whole object. Now we're basically switching to control it with a pivot point. Okay, of course there are different ways how we can switch between object and component mode, and by right-clicking, this is a very commonly used, and there is also another way which is also commonly used, and that is hotkeys. F8, F9, F10 and F11. And if we actually go here under select, if we are using polygons, so one thing that we should mention here is our status line, polygons, select object component, that simply toggles back and forth, vertices, edges and faces. Those are the main ones that we need to worry about at this point. And click on object component, or F8, one more time. It will switch it back to the object mode. Notice that this is exactly what's happening here in the status line when we are switching between F8. Notice how this icon here, or this menu here, changed from object, polygons, or just simply default, components, or all objects. So I mean, switching here switches this information here. Same thing as these icons, so it's just same, it's all these different things that do exactly the same thing. You click on this icon, it switches to components. You click on this one, switches to object mode. And when we click on the component mode, notice that here we've got a couple of selection masks that are selected. We can manually turn them on and off. So right now I actually won't be able to select anything. And when I click on this one, the square point, now I can grab my vertices. If I deselect that and instead click on this line here, I can grab edges. And if I deselect that and click on these squares, these three squares, I can grab faces. So again, it's basically same features that allow us to do a similar thing. We can definitely do more with the selection masks here, because there is more components that are available to us to see and select, but we'll get to those later. For now, we just need to understand how to switch between object mode and component mode, so we can start shaping our geometry by simply grabbing the vertices, or grabbing the edges, or grabbing the faces and moving them, rotating them and scaling them, and then going back to the object mode. One last thing that I might want to mention, just to kind of drive some of the main principles home, is that when we go and create a polygon primitive, let's say cube, when we go to the option box, here is our width, height, depth, divisions, and so forth. This describes the shape, okay, while scale here, translate, rotate, that defines the pivot information. So here are two different things we can actually change, and this is the same information right here. You can get to the shape node inside the channel box. So here is let's say width, height, and depth, 2 units, right? We just changed the dimensions of the shape, while it is a different operation if I go in and change the scale. The final version will look the same, but at this point we have been controlling the width, we have been changing the shape. Here we have been affecting it on a higher level, which is the pivot point and the scale attribute. Okay. In other words, here we use the scale to scale the object. Here we used, you can think of it this way, we used vertices or components to change the dimensions of the object. Notice that I can scale it, I can actually move it and offset it and even rotate it, right? But what will happen to our pivot point? Nothing. The pivot point will still remain at the same location. So here I can move my cube, I rotated it and scale it, but the pivot point is still in its original location, right? It's sort of like we've got these vertices here. We took one, moved one there, then the other one there, and kind of one at a time we have changed our shape, but it has nothing to do with where the pivot point is. The pivot point is still remains behind, because it's actually two separate nodes. One is the shape, one is the pivot point, is an anchor. Kind of like again, if we maybe draw a parallel with Adobe Photoshop, we've got an image that has an information about the pink pixels and their color and the resolution, and then we can take that image information and use a transform or a free transform tool that has an where we can scale, rotate, and even move that image based on the anchor point that we can also adjust. So I hope that made sense. This is a very fundamental topic, the pivot point. So get used to it, play around with it, and I'm sure you'll get it.